Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talking About Birds, the only Cardinal podcast that, like the ruby-throated hummingbird, is likely to have a short life. My name is Nate Heininger, and I am joined this week by special guest, friend of the show, host of Peace, Love, and Baseball, and co-host of Babes podcast, Kelsey Burd. Welcome back to the show.
What's up, Nate? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you. Ben is up north, might have been eaten by a bear by now. We have no idea. We'll find out at some point. And honestly, I think it's an immediate improvement on the show. So thanks for being here with me this week. We're going to check in on Kelsey's trip to London. We're going to also talk a little bit about the current vibes around the Cardinals. We're going to talk about the upcoming trade deadline and the series against the Cubs and the series against Arizona. If you have an idea for the opening bit, tweet us at Talk About Birds. Kelsey, thank you again for being here. The last time you were on the show was April 20th. It's fair to say it's been that feels like I know it's only on the calendar like 2 months, but that feels like a decade ago. How have you been holding up? How have the last few months been for you?
It feels like it was a lifetime ago, truly.
Yes.
And yeah, it's hard to even take it back to that place mentally or emotionally that we were on April 20th. I'm thinking that date specifically because Jim Edmonds pointed out today how that is the last date that Zach Thompson actually had pitched for the Cardinals before today. So it has been that long.
Yeah, I mean, you can just sort of trace the story of the season almost off of Zach Thompson alone, right? Highly regarded prospect, comes in, falters, gets sent down, maybe to become a bullpen ace, but instead gets converted to a starter, struggles at basically everything, kind of like the Cardinals, and then is back. Maybe looked kind of good today, but maybe it's too late also. We're going to talk about all of that, but yeah, that's
kind of like Ben with that bear. It is a wait to see right now.
Yeah, it's Schrodinger's eaten by a bear right now. We don't know if he's been eaten by a bear until we look for his remains. Yeah, it's been well, are you regretting getting into baseball podcasting so much now that the Cardinals have had such a bad season?
You know what? I'm not. And in fact, I'm glad that I did when I did, because I think it's really given me a platform to process my emotions. It's given me a reason to stay invested on the days when it's been hard to stay invested. And I think all around, going through this experience, this different experience for especially me as a millennial Cardinal fan, has only made me a better baseball fan. So I'm trying to find the silver lining there.
What a positive spin. We've been talking about that on the show too, where when everything was going really well last year, there's always something to talk about, but everyone loves the controversy, right? You love it's the 24-hour news cycle, right? Is there something that we can rant about? So in some ways, you're right. I mean, this has been a great platform to be able to just get on it and rant about Marmol or Mozeliak or the trade deadline or whatever. So I'm glad to hear your spirits are high. I would have expected nothing less. I had a question for you. Since you've last been on, started doing something with guests, this is a term that I learned from birding. As the podcast has gone downhill so much, we're really leaning into the birding stuff, trying to keep it interesting for people. You may have heard me talk about it on previous episodes. There's a term called the spark bird. And in birding, it is what bird got you into enjoying looking at birds, right? What was your spark bird? So we've kind of twisted it into what made you a Cardinal fan. Is there a specific player that really made you feel connected and start to love the sport? So I wanted to know, do you have a spark bird, Kelsey? Are you Have you thought about what your spark bird might be?
Yeah, well, first off, I should mention that I guess I feel like I have a literal spark bird because my dad and my grandpa are, birds, in a sense,
Of course.
BURD.
Yes.
And they are the ones that really got me into baseball. But player-wise, I actually have one when I think back on it from like pitching, hitting, and defense. Like there's a
Hmm.
player that made me like really appreciate and got me excited about that and became a fan of the game as a whole. So my first favorite player ever was Matt Morris. I would have been
Okay.
like 10 or 11 years old in his 2001 season when he won 22 games. He was third in Cy Young voting. He was an all-star for the first time. And I don't know, there's something about the pitchers that I always like had a little girl crush on right away when I first started watching a lot of baseball. And at that age, I was, 10 or 11. I was old enough to start to understand like what was going on, but by no means like dig deep into the statistics or anything.
Sure.
So I remember my dad starting to explain things to me and teaching me about the game by asking me like what's the situation, and what he would mean by that is like how many runners on base, what's the count, those kinds of things. And so I think by asking myself that question and learning just like okay where everything is at on the scoreboard, and learning how much control the pitcher had over the situation, like I appreciated how important the pitcher was to contributing and controlling the game first. So loved Matt Morris. And then that, of course, was the same year that Albert Pujols made
Of
his
course.
debut. So I think
Yep.
in the sense of, offense and hitting and those big exciting moments, like this is the first year that I really remember like watching baseball without Albert Pujols. And he's been very much the face of the game in those big offensive moments for me.
Yeah.
And then the following year, 2002, was when Scott Rowland was traded to the Cardinals. And then 2003, 2006 had his all star seasons and continued to add to his ultimately Hall of Fame career. So that's what really made me, I think, start to appreciate the art of defense and just put all the pieces together. I was totally sold.
I love that. Yeah, the fact that you were 10 or 11 and you had a pitcher as your favorite player really does speak to the level of education that you were provided about the game. Because my favorite player, my Sparkbird, was Ozzie Smith, and it's because he did flips. So you can
Oh,
see
yeah.
where we're really approaching the game at at different angles. So I can appreciate your degree of investment and how informed you were watching it at such an early age. And then, of course, yeah, Pujols and Roland. I mean, the whole MV3. Jim Edmonds
Yeah.
is this whole new thing for all of us that it's hard to actually
I know.
really wrap.
Right.
But in
Don't
that
forget that,
moment,
Edmonds, though. Yeah.
yes, and I believe Jim Edmonds should be in the Hall of Fame right alongside Roland and eventually Pujols. But it's a
For
little
sure.
hard right now to really settle my thoughts on how I feel long term
Yeah,
about
we
Jim
couldn't have
Edmonds.
just
But
left it with that, but
we could have just left it. Yeah, but no, it's cool. He's great. Well, that's really cool. So thank you for sharing. I listened to your recent episode of Peace, Love, and Baseball. It's a great show. Recommend everybody who listens to the show go and check it out. And you had the whole episode was focused on bad fan behavior, which I think is an interesting topic, and it's a good topic for right now, considering the season that we've had, and some of the behaviors that we've seen online and even in real life that have come from such a frustrating season, and some things that I think I totally aligned with you on, like what we shouldn't be doing as fans. I try not to tell people too much like what they should or shouldn't be doing as a fan. Part of fandom is enjoying it how you want to, but there's some
totally.
toxic behavior out there, right?
Yeah, and I
And
felt so weird because actually, like, my 3rd one, I think, was like, "Don't tell other people how to be a fan," and I was like, "Wait, this whole episode is telling
uh,
people how to be a fan,"
it's
but you just said it perfectly.
Yeah, there's a delicate balance there too. And which actually brings me to the one that I wanted to talk to you about, because this is something that I've actually spent a fair amount of time thinking about, and that is the wave. So you probably didn't see that one coming out of all the ones that you talked about, but I think I have an opposing view from you, but I think I found a middle ground for us. Okay.
Okay.
So you stated on your show that you don't like the wave because it is it's distracting. It's this like major thing that like really makes it difficult to view the game. And I have felt that way before. There was a long time in my life that I actually 100% agreed with you. The wave would start at a game, and I'd be like, ugh, get out of here, amateurs. This, you're standing in my
Yeah.
way. I have since kind of reversed, and in the spirit of enjoying, letting people enjoy things, I feel now that I don't really care about the wave. In fact, I like to think that for kids who maybe didn't have their parents teaching them about the art of the game like you did at such a young age, just instilling some excitement at the stadium maybe is enough to leave a positive feeling about baseball.
Yeah.
And then as they get older, like that turns into an actual love of the game. So I kind of like the wave now, even though I don't necessarily enjoy participating in it. But what drives me crazy is the guy who's trying to start the wave at a game. I don't know if you've ever sat in the section where
Yeah.
someone is trying to get the wave going. I think I would
Mm-hmm.
like the wave a lot more if it happened more like, I don't know, maybe the actual stadium is like orchestrating it, and like Fred
Yes,
Bird's out there, and it's like an
that is
organized
really
thing or something like that. But there
mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
no more desperate human on earth than the person who's standing at the bottom of a section, frantically trying to get everybody in that section's attention and line
Right.
them all up. I feel such secondhand like stress and
Yes.
almost like
I'm like
embarrassment for
feeling
that
stressed as
person.
you're talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know what compels someone to decide I want to spend the next upwards of like 15 to 20 minutes to try to get the wave going. I guess it's probably pretty satisfying that once it gets going, you look around like a crowd of like
Yeah.
40,000 people and you're like, look what I've done. I wield such power or something like
Yes.
that. But that is like, I'm such an opposite person. I'm like, nobody look at me. I just want to watch the game.
Right.
So I think the wave is fine, but I don't like the people who are starting the wave. What are your thoughts?
That I think is a really, really good point. And I think, first of all, I got onto this kind of like ban the wave bandwagon, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
because like it always like mildly annoyed me, kind of like you're saying. Like it annoys me because it is distracting. It's often like half-assed because
Yeah.
it's like, is it happening? Is it not happening? Because it's not organized, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
I like organized fun. Maybe that's
Yes.
it. But yeah, it is often also done like when so you mentioned it perfectly because when I was at the Lennon series, I was right a couple rows away from the guy who just had to start the
You,
wave.
yeah.
And not only did I feel his, intensity and anxiousness as he was trying to get it going, but then every time it would go around and when it would die off, and he was like, oh no, now I got to start it again. And so it was just
Yeah.
an ongoing thing. And of course, it was that Saturday game, the first game of the series, when the Cardinals were playing horribly and,
Mm-hmm.
no one really cared about the game at this point because it was obvious which way it was going to go. And so, yeah, it just like really solidified my anti wave feelings. But I totally agree with you in the terms of like, you know, having some fun engagement, especially for kids. And I do agree that those kinds of moments can be some of the first memories that ultimately lead to fans of the game. So I think you're right. You found the middle ground.
So if we can just get the people to stop so desperately trying to start the wave, especially at horrible moments, then maybe we can all go back to some sort of appreciation for fan engagement. Because yeah, it also drives me crazy when it's like bottom of the eighth and it's a tie game or something, and you're like, everybody stop. But great segue, because I really wanted to ask you about your trip to London. We had Akira on the show a couple weeks ago, and we got the UK perspective of of the games in London, and it was wonderful. If this is your first time listening to the show, go back a few episodes and check it out. He had a wonderful way of explaining sort of baseball's position in London and in the UK and even Europe to some degree, and it was really fascinating. But you have a totally different lens on this. Bunch of dirty Yanks heading out to foggy London town to catch a game. My first question was, this is probably a dumb question, but just so I know, did you plan the whole trip around this, or was this something like a crazy cosmic coincidence that you were already going over there and then the Cardinals were playing?
So we did go, I guess, more or less specifically for the games, but my sister lives in London and I had never been to visit her. So it was
Okay.
more like
Perfect time.
the excuse to finally go over and visit her. So we were actually going to go in 2020 when they were supposed to play there, because she had already lived there for a few years at that point. That obviously put a halt to all travel plans for a while.
Sure.
So yeah, it was like, why not?
Yeah.
It's just,
Perfect.
the perfect excuse to go.
So tell me about your trip. What stood out to you, I guess, from a someone who's been to a ton of baseball games here in the States. I know you were in Chicago. You were at a game just recently. Saw you on the TV.
My finest moment,
um,
for sure.
yeah, yeah, it's a good look. So what was your sort of takeaway from this trip, or what stood out to you?
Yeah, so I loved Akira's interview with how he spoke about like looking around for fans and like
Mm-hmm.
finding that camaraderie, and from his perspective of knowing that, he's one of a few that are taking it in regularly and not really knowing what to anticipate in having it come to his home or closer to his home.
Yeah.
So we also felt that like in a different sense, because we actually got there over a week before the game. So we had spent the whole week there. And in those few days, like Friday, we actually went to the stadium and got to attend the workout day before the two games. But that was the first time that we were really in the area where the games were going to be. So when we started to see people wearing baseball attire, because nobody wears, you don't wear sports team attire unless you are going to a sports game in the UK. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that my sister and her boyfriend, who is from there, have explained to us, prior. But that's how we knew, we saw anybody wearing any kind
Yeah.
of sports attire that, oh, they know what's going on. And so it almost felt, like this instant connection with people as we saw them on the tube or, getting closer to
Yeah.
the stadium. And so that was really exciting, just to then like be like, "Oh, are you from here? Are you from there? Like, what is your connection to this?" And that was such a fun part of it overall, was just talking to different people and all the different walks of life that were there to experience the same thing that, we get to experience all the time.
Yeah, you speak about the I keep wanting to say outfits, the clothing and all of the gear that we wear to support our
I believe
teams,
is what
like
they might call it.
the fit. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean here it's ubiquitous, especially in St. Louis. I worked at a place one time that was like you have to wear your work. It was like predefined work clothes or Cardinal gear. It was like that's one of the two things you could wear, and this was at work. So it's like so baked into
Yeah.
the existence here in St. Louis. Even if you don't care about the Cardinals, you are forced to be surrounded by Cardinal stuff all of the time. So that's interesting. Did anything stand out about like the stadium and the setup? I know Akira spoke kind of, it was like a hodgepodge of like all the different baseball elements. Like I know it's kind of a strange setup for the stadium itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they did a great job with it. The thing that was so different about the experience for me, having gone to all the stadiums here, was how e- easily accessible it was. Honestly, like getting
Hmm.
in and getting food and going to the bathroom. Like that stadium is built for over 60,000 people. And I don't know if there just were more facilities or if it was better organized. I don't know, but it was a very enjoyable experience. just in terms of like the ability to move around and take in the experience, then from, no shade, but being at guaranteed rate like a week ago, and you just feel like so overstimulated just trying to walk to get to your seat, and stressed out, especially with the pitch clock, to go to the bathroom as quickly as you can. So
Yes.
that was just a very different experience overall. And I think because there were even the people who were there as more spectators to take in the ambiance were still very interested in what was going on in the field, even if they didn't understand it, because it was maybe their first time getting to experience it live like that. So there, I don't know, there was just, it seemed very like calm and focused in a sense. And I heard Akira speaking to you about how, yeah, they can't take drinks into the seats, typically at like football matches. And that I knew about because my sister had mentioned it to me, and we weren't sure if they were going to allow it there, which of course they did, which was great. But there's no cup holders or anything in the stadium, which is just so weird. Like, so little things like that were strange
Yeah.
and definitely noticeable. And the biggest thing that we noticed right off the bat was the fan engagement, in terms of like anytime the bat made contact with the ball in the first few innings of the first game, the whole crowd was like, "What's happening? This is it, home run!"
Yeah.
Because it was just any kind of action. So
Yeah.
that was super fascinating to us too.
That's awesome. Yeah, just a bunch of excited people just for the
Yeah.
like the act of baseball. You probably don't even really know what they're cheering for, or well, I have to imagine most people that were baseball fans, right? I don't know, like even if they weren't necessarily the most educated, like are you really buying a ticket to this thing and just going just purely out of like interest? I imagine most people had some connection to the sport, or like a friend was a fan or something like that, and it was
Yeah, I'm not sure. So I had asked my sister a lot about this because she has been over there since like 2018 or 2018, and she went over to do her master's program, and as her dissertation she actually did it on the NFL and their expansion to the UK. So
interesting.
she had looked a lot into that, and like, all the extent of fan engagement and what the goals ultimately are with it. And we thought it was really interesting when we looked into it that in 2019, the first time that the MLB played in the UK, and it was the Red Sox and the Yankees, that there was actually, very clear stats out there that 30% of the attendees were like tourists from the US, and 70% of attendees were from the UK. And we thought that would have been the opposite, I guess.
Yeah.
But then when you think about it, you're like, I mean, yeah, the cost of like having to travel there and then go to the game, yeah, that's way
Yeah, it's
extreme.
pretty
Than to like,
prohibitive.
yeah, then if you could just, hop the train and buy a ticket, even if it is 50 pounds, like to get to experience American culture is a big part of their culture.
Hmm.
So I do think there was a lot of people there that knew less about what was going on than more, I
Just
guess.
there just for
Yeah, to take it in.
the spectacle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I really I get torn on these efforts, like how the MLB chooses to try to promote itself outside of the United States. Like I think it's critical, and I appreciate that there's an effort to it. I
Yeah.
have I've wondered if like is London and Europe really the focus? Like, wouldn't it make more sense if we were playing a ton of games in Latin America and South America? And I know that has been
Right.
happening to some degree, and of course, why not both? But it just feels like I'd love to see like when has a game happened in Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic? And
Yeah.
I know some of this is resources and capacity and all of that, so it's a complicated issue. But like, I love that we play games in London and people get to go to it. But I would love to see more investment and more focus in the countries that truly have incredible baseball programs and
Yeah.
have a ton of representation in the league. And it feels like we don't spend enough time down there. But again, I know it's complicated, so I'd love to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I agree. It was really interesting to just be in an environment where like I'm sure you saw online that I met Albert Pujols in Trafalgar Square
Yeah.
because no one knew who he was. And he
Yeah.
was just standing there completely accessible. And I was like, well, if no one else is going to go say hi to him, I guess I will. Like,
Yeah.
that just never would have happened. And like you said, in Puerto Rico, in the Dominican Republic, even in Mexico, like obviously in the United States, with any sort of baseball event around
Mhm.
Albert Pujols, that he would have been that directly accessible to me or to anyone, just hanging out.
Yeah.
So
One of the best players of all time in the sport, just hanging
right.
out.
And then like after I went and said, hey, and got his autograph, that people are like, oh yeah, who is that?
Oh, that
I'm
must
like,
be a
what?
guy.
Who is?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I
You're
can't
like
breathe. I can't tell you. But it was
start
really fun to see all the fans that were like taking in, even for a lot of them, a completely new experience and how
Mhm.
it was all crafted by MLB. And there were certainly a good amount of people there who I talked to, a number of people who even were there like by themselves because they are the people who stay up really late and fall asleep on the couch, watching the games that are on there at midnight their time. And I sat next to a lovely man named Ben who was a Cubs fan. And I was like, how did you become a Cubs fan? Like you grew up, a couple hours outside of London. And he told me it was because he was a Michael Jordan fan. And so he had
Oh.
just started following all Chicago sports teams. And he was not the only person who told me that. So that was like a really interesting through line for Chicago Cubs fans, that they like the Chicago Cubs because of Michael Jordan. Who would have thought? But he
Yeah,
was so educated about the game because he had like taught himself through YouTube videos. So
yeah.
yeah, there was all different walks of life and different storylines.
It's funny it's just poor White Sox, you can't catch a break.
Right.
You there's like a direct connection with
Yeah.
Michael Jordan. And it's like, well, I'm gonna go and still like the Cubs
Yeah,
over the White.
they missed out on that one too. Mm.
That's incredible. Did you get any? I was gonna ask, how was the food? Did you participate in any of the ridiculous like concessions that existed, or just in London in general?
Yeah, so I don't know if you heard, the number of different Cardinals players and the broadcast team talking about how underwhelmed they were with the food, but like they should have hung out with me because I had great food the whole time that I was there, and maybe that's because I had someone who lives there that knew where to take us and what we should try. But I mean, they have great Indian food there, so
Hmm.
we specifically like sought that out one night. Korean fried chicken, which like I was like, oh, fried chicken, like no, I'm good. It's not fried chicken like here. It's better. It's worth it.
Yeah, I'm
Give
a
it a go.
huge fan of Korean fried chicken, and
Oh
one of my
man,
favorite restaurants in Chicago. Can't remember the name right now, but it's a British Indian restaurant that like is fantastic. Yeah, I think there is just a running trope in the U.S. that the British have bad food, right?
yeah,
So I think as a broadcaster, you're just like looking for the low hanging fruit to sort of like you
must
know
be. Yeah.
jab at London, so you make fun of the food.
But I did hear you talking with Akira about the boomstick hot dog, and
Uh-huh.
my mom made a point to get the boomstick nachos.
Yes.
So she came and she was
Okay.
just so proud, and I think it took 6 of us to, even get close to finishing it. But
Hell yeah. So I need a little bit more. Can you break it down for me? What were the boomstick nachos? What do you got?
well, it
If
was
you can
like,
remember.
I mean, I want to say 2 feet seems like not long enough, but it must have been at least 2 feet of, like a bat-sized, I guess, board
Yes.
of nachos. And then they've got what they call Doritos, which are not at all what Doritos are here. There's all sorts of
How
additives that, like, they would
how
just
could that be
never.
different?
Well, so one of the biggest differences in, like, food regulations from the UK and
Ah,
here is all the
okay.
different additives and things
Yeah,
that
they
are.
actually have food regulations there
Right,
compared to
right.
yeah, got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they are a little bit more proactive in their approach to what they will let people put in their bodies, which I gotta say I
Mhm.
appreciate. But anyway, so they were Doritos, but they were basically just like corn chips. And
Uh-huh.
um, yes, the pico and salsa and sour cream and cheese and and then some sort of ground beef as well. I mean, it was pretty standard. It was just
So just
the sheer
huge.
size of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really like the novelty with that item.
I feel like I mean that of course sounds appealing to me, but like of all the things that I want a massive plate of, like I feel like nachos, there's a clock on every plate of nachos before they
Yes.
become significantly less enjoyable, or at least just less. I guess can still taste good, don't get me wrong, but it's different than you want some degree of crunch in your nachos, and it doesn't take too long for nachos to lose that. So I imagine by the time you got to the center of that 2-foot plate, it was more of a soup.
Yeah, it definitely needed to be a group effort for them not, to get to that point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and it sounds like you had a fantastic time. Do you think you would travel? Like, are you assuming you still want to visit your sister again? It was a good trip. Like, are you going to try to time it around future games in London? Or are you feeling like you experienced it, you're good?
I absolutely would. Yeah, because it was not like there was nothing stressful about it. Like it's very accessible by public transit. Like I said, out of the stadium was a little bit tricky, which I guess according to, people who live there and have gone to soccer matches because it's where West Ham plays there.
Mm,
That's always something that happens where like you kind of just have to stand and wait and hang out and they move you through accordingly. So it did take a little bit longer to get out of the stadium, but I mean, overall, no, like it was such a positive experience that I would absolutely love to go back. And like Akira was sharing, like I thought it was very cool that there were so many, representatives of all different teams and their
yeah,
reasoning for why they were tied to those teams was really fascinating too. But
yeah,
just like he said, like I would totally love to be the guy there that's like, has the other team's hat on that maybe nobody even knows about. And it's just, a conversation piece and a way to
yeah.
connect with fans from who knows where. So yeah, I would totally go back for it.
There's like a sports anthropology angle on this whole thing, right? I guess that's
Mhm.
kind of what your sister's doing. So just for NFL, yeah, that's awesome. Well, why don't we actually talk a little bit about the Cardinals specifically now? So, uh, again, the last time you were here, mid April, we spent a fair amount of time talking about the vibes and how important vibes can be on a team. We were fresh off of the still going somehow story of Ali Marmol chastising Tyler O'Neill in public. And we
Mhm.
were just starting to get the hints towards the season that would come. And now here we are. It's Wednesday, July 19th. We've got Dylan Carlson crying, John Mozeliak selling, and the Cardinals on a bit of a heater. They've won 8 of the last 10, 5 in a row. Things are clicking. Of course, they are right now. How are you feeling about the vibes around the St. Louis Cardinals right now?
Mm. Well, there's a lot to break down here. So let's start with Dylan. So he says it hurts that he has an unclear role with his
Yeah,
team. To which I say, get in line. And I say that with love and support because everything
yeah,
else he said is very much along the lines of like not having a defined role is affecting, the ability to optimize whatever he could do to help his team. Absolutely valid. But I guess a lot of this has been like an O'Neill versus Carlson. It like seems like some hot debate lately. And
yeah,
I don't by any means see that as like an either or situation. I stand firm that Tyler O'Neill is your starting left fielder upon return. And the outfield experiment from like day one of the season has been a disaster.
yeah,
The outfield defense has undoubtedly had an effect on the outcome of the season thus far, and
yep,
it needs to end as soon as possible. And I believe that part of that is having Tyler O'Neill in left field where he
yeah,
should have always been. But if you're aligning like your starting outfield for defense, right? It's O'Neill, Carlson, Nootbaar. But we're
right,
not because Walker needs reps in right field and we need his
right,
bat. And I'm not going to argue with that. So, like, you could platoon Carlson and Nootbaar a little bit. You can replace Walker late in games for defense, which we saw them do a lot last season. And it seemed to work. It kind of seemed to be Ollie's thing. So, Could get back to that. Wouldn't hate to see that. And then, it's a whole different conversation of why like the DH position is jam logged. But anyway, Dylan's tears are simply, like highlighting again the disconnect and the bad communication that we've seen all season from office to clubhouse.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, like Mo says he's selling. I mean, at this point, that is what he has to say, right? Like, is there anyone who would be happy if he's said, I'm just going to sit back and see what happens? No, like
Yeah.
that's what he has to say at this point. Like he has
Yeah.
no leverage in the trade
Yeah.
market with how the team has played thus far. It's glaringly obvious that the pitching market and the evolution of the game has gotten ahead of the Cardinals' like entire philosophy on pitching. And that's going to take some time and effort to adapt to. So more than
Yeah.
anything, what I'm hearing him say is like, we have accepted that we need to adapt, which I
Yeah.
think is important.
Yes. Yes, very much so.
Right. So let me ask you this. At the beginning of the season, did you think the Cardinals were going to win the Central Division?
I'm an optimist till I die. And so, yes, I did. I think we all acknowledged you couldn't go 2 minutes into any Cardinal outside the Cardinals themselves media and not hear everybody saying the pitching is going to be a problem. I had some hope that it would follow the same track that we have seen for like 5 years in a row now, is that the pitching doesn't actually collapse until around June or July. And there's enough time for them to save it through the Band-Aid process at the trade deadline, which has been a formula that has seemed to work for winning the Central. Now,
Yes.
if you said, Nate, did you think the Cardinals were going to win the World Series in 2023? I would have said hard no. They were at best the fourth or fifth best team in the NL. And it just lined up that or at least three of the worst teams in baseball are in the Central, right? We all know the weakness of the division. So, and the reason that formula did not work this year is because the pitching, it didn't collapse. It never started. It was
Right.
bad out of the gates. We never had a really good starting rotation this year. So there wasn't even time to even play 500 for a while. It all just collapsed immediately.
Right. Like even the guys you thought there wouldn't be an issue with, there was an issue with.
Yeah.
So along with the pressure that puts on the offense, which you
Mm-hmm.
have to assume like contributed at least some extent to their lack of ability to produce in some of these games, where like all those Jordan Montgomery starts where he, went at least 6 innings, let 2 or less runs, and they still couldn't put anything together. Like you throw in the misalignment of the defense and the rule changes, and it's somehow this perfect storm that, like, it's easy to say now, like, well, of course that happened. But and now that Mo has raised the white flag, so to speak,
Yeah.
like everyone has quickly come around and been like, finally, it's about time, like take some
Yeah.
responsibility. But let's go back to April 20th. We were all like a little bit shocked about just how bad the first half of it was overall.
Yeah.
Like nobody thought they were going to win 100 games, maybe even 90 games would have been a really pleasant surprise. But I personally did not think that they would be in last place in the division for honestly even a day.
Yeah.
So
I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone except for the most pessimistic of fans who would have predicted this. And you know what? They're getting their flowers now, right? Every listener out there who loves to doomcast everything. All right, is this really what you wanted?
Right. So now the Cardinals are winning. The Central Division is terrible. Spoiler alert again from last time I was here. The Pirates are not for real.
Yep.
So I don't know, man. I'm having to regulate my emotions over Cardinals baseball after the first half of the season. Like all I can say is take care of yourself, Cardinals fans. We're still on a roller coaster, and it's hard to say where it ends.
Marmol said something interesting today that I'm going to paraphrase. I should have written it down, but he basically said we've had to play a different game through most of this year than what we want because we're behind. We've not been able to take the extra base. We've had to be more passive because we didn't want to make a unnecessary out when you're behind. And I thought that was really interesting to me because I kind of hate that, right?
Yeah.
If your optimal game is what we saw last year, this aggressive approach, take the extra base. There is no passiveness in the St. Louis Cardinals.
Right.
And then we find out that they're adopting a passive approach when they're behind because they're afraid of making mistakes. I feel like you're only perpetuating the problem. And like, if you're not preaching your best version of your game, then how would you ever come back? How would you ever be good again
Right.
if you're only playing from behind? So I don't know. This was something he said today after the game. There may have been more context around it, but it really stood out to me because I'm like, that feels bad. And that was something that I wanted to ask you about because I know leadership is something that you think a lot about and that you talk a lot about.
Yeah.
And on this same episode that we were talking about earlier, you're also generally against the like fire so and so crowd. And I tend to align with you. I think it's like people jump to like fire this guy like out
Yeah.
of like too quickly. It's not how the world works. And do you really want this person to be out of a job? So
Right.
I'm not on the fire Marmol bandwagon a little bit for, the reasons you've stated, just being inherently against calling for someone to be removed, like fired from their job. It's not like they're, it's like yell at your politicians all day, but come on, let's give these guys,
Right.
a
It's
little
really
bit
not a good
of, a
look.
little bit of, yeah,
You know?
let's give them a little bit of grace. But that doesn't mean we can't be unhappy and frustrated with
Yeah.
coaches and call out where they have failed. And I think there's been a lot of that this year. So now that we're further into the year, there's been a lot of discussion around Marmol. How are you feeling about him and his leadership style?
Yeah, I think that I have a lot of empathy for him, and that might be specific to me and like positions that I've been in my professional life. But like I probably said the last time that I was here, like I just don't feel comfortable like pointing the finger directly at him on much of anything because I don't know how much of it is up to him at all.
Yeah.
Like the very nature of his hire was that he is the yes man, was that he is born and bred through the organization. And, he is going to be the face that is, maybe more or less like a talking puppet. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just have a really hard time saying like he is the problem. I certainly, the one like definite criticism that I guess I would have on him this year versus last, like I thought he handled the media well last year. I appreciated how candid he was and how straightforward that
Hmm.
he was. With like just he thought he walked the line really well of being like appropriately candid, which
Yeah.
is a discretion that can be really hard to teach or perfect.
Yeah.
But this year, like he's put himself in a position, I think, to be more easily criticized by the way that he's addressed the media, particularly when they've been going through these really tough times. And again, I still have a hard time like blaming him because who would deal with that particularly well? Like, I cannot imagine. You think perhaps they could have given him, some better resources, some better talking points to, help him navigate that because I I don't know. Like I think that at times he was, definitely dodging or talking around things, and even sometimes seemed like he was somewhat condescending or frustrated by what was being asked of him. But I also am like, well, who wouldn't be
Yeah.
to some extent? And yeah, I guess I come back to like I said, I have empathy for him because like I have been quite literally the face of a franchise of where like it seems like I have a lot of control over, and I guess I do maybe even have, a certain level of autonomy and control over certain things, but at the root of things of where, these fundamental changes need to be made that are actually going to lead to different results, like
Yeah.
he could feel and quite honestly be very helpless when it comes down to
Yeah.
that. So
I tend to agree, Kelsey. I personally feel like he was pretty much set up for failure this year, both in the team that he was handed, which obviously this has all been worst case scenario. But again, this A lot of people saw a version of this coming. No one saw like last place. And you know what? They're not in last place anymore. But anyway, no one saw this bad coming, but a lot of people saw bad coming, right? And so he's been given a team with 2 starting pitchers and a whole bunch of people who we hoped would be starting pitchers.
Right.
And then it all fell apart. And then Arenado had one of his worst starts. O'Neill immediately hurt again. Like he's had a lot. The Cardinals have had a lot of bad luck. There's also just been literal like baseball gods bad luck. Their record in 1-run games is horrible. Like they've been having basically the inverse Marlins season, where the Marlins have had absolutely everything break for them. It's talked about at the broadcast this whole series about how they've won so many 1-run games. When you look at the Pythagorean Pythagorean record for the Cardinals, they're way closer to 500. It's still below, but way closer. We'd be having a totally different conversation right now if the Cardinals were like 2 games under 500, which is probably closer to what they've played than what their actual record states right now. So it's been a lot of bad luck, a lot of bad things that have been kind of dumped on his shoulders. That said, he needs to spend more time with a communications manager and Mozeliak to make sure that they are on the same page about what the future of this team is and why they're doing the things that they're doing.
Yes.
Why do we have 3 catchers on the team? There's got to be a reason. You can share that with us. Like he was incredibly candid last year. He was incredibly transparent. The Cardinals have been making moves and doing stuff all year to try to fix this. And every post-game conference has just been like, well, what do you want? You don't think we're going to win? It's like, no, I don't think you're going to win. You haven't won at all this year. So it's been like his frustration and his sort of condescending tone to like, I think very fair and reasonable questions. I don't think the media has been, like particularly bad to him. I think in fact, he's like, there are other sports markets that would have been way worse, and not saying that that's how it should be, but like with St. Louis, we're like everyone wants to love the Cardinals, so I that's the big thing. Like the Cardinals have seemed like they've had no plan this year, and maybe that's the case, which sucks, and that goes up to Mozeliak. Or he's just been really bad at communicating that plan in a difficult time. And I think that's something that he could hopefully learn from. And hopefully we just go back to winning. But, he's young. Winning fixes everything, right? But he's young and presumably he's going to be a manager for a long time. So he's got to learn. So.
Yeah, you asked specifically about the vibes, and while like I guess I gave a lot of specifics that ultimately lead up to that, like my overall current read on this date, this Wednesday, July 19th, on the vibe is that, the vibes are questionable, but the vibes are interesting. And I think Ollie Marmol is a big part of that, because the team, and I include like him and the coaches in that, like the guys in the clubhouse, they seem like currently at least that they are like interacting, speaking about each other, as if they've come to some kind of understanding. Like we've seen some really odd times. I'm trying to think, like a few weeks ago, I can't remember what game it was, but they won a game and they literally looked like all of their dogs just died on the field. Like
brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, like even when, I was watching the game this afternoon and it was like 4-2 for a while. And I was just thinking like, wow, there was a time where like 4-2, even though the Cardinals are leading, like I would have been sure they were going to lose. And like this just would have felt completely different. So it almost seems like they have come to an understanding about like what they can and can't control. And sometimes in order to focus on like what you can control and maximize on that, you have to learn like what you're not in control of. And maybe Mozeliak in the front office haven't made that, super clear or super easy. So perhaps that they've come to terms with that. And this might be completely out of left field here, but I'm always trying to relate like maybe real life or more, Joe Schmo experiences to what this team might be experiencing. So it kind of reminds me of the show that I did in high school, where a musical, everybody in the show was great. The show that we were doing was like a very popular musical, and the choreography and like the stage movement in the show was really bad, to the point where we were all just like, this is going to ruin it. Like what are we going to do? We were so excited. And we had an assistant director who just happened to be like an amazing choreographer and director. So we ended up like planning a few secret sessions with him and the cast where we met up in the school cafeteria and we reblocked and re-choreographed the entire show and made it so good, and somehow also made the people who were in charge of it, like, they thought it was their idea all along. We called
That's
it
key.
Operation Cookie Bake, and we like pretended that we were all meeting in the cafeteria to bake cookies, and it was like our secret code
Yeah.
word. So I think maybe Marmol and the team have a little Operation Cookie Bake of their own going
Okay.
on, and they're just like keeping their head down. Like, we know Mo has to say what he has to say at this point, but we got to keep our focus on
Yeah.
the game and the day that's in front of us. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it's definitely been better. Is it that? Is it just positive regression? Some of these guys finally putting it together. Jack
right.
Flaherty's been looking good. Michaelis has been looking good. Montgomery's been looking good. Arenado is back to what he, has always been. But
Solid
maybe that's,
pitching and good
yeah. So,
defense wins baseball games. I don't know.
Turn-
Who would have guessed?
yeah, who would have thought, right? Turns out. So it's going to be a really interesting trade deadline. So,
It
which we're
is.
going to talk about here in a minute. But before we do, Kelsey, I would love if you would take a minute and tell our listeners a little bit about your shows and how people could maybe check out some of your work after they listen to this show.
Yeah, so my weekly podcast is called Peace, Love, and Baseball. It is a hodgepodge of all things from fitness and wellness to entertainment to always at least something about baseball. And we have a lot of guests as well as solo episodes where I'll kind of elaborate on things that are pertinent to the baseball world and the current happenings. And that comes out weekly on Tuesdays. You can follow along on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. And the easiest way to find that is by following me on Twitter at KBurd, BURD tweets. And there's my little link tree, and you could find all the Peace, Love, and Baseball stuff along with links to Babes, which is the podcast that is all about baseball. We cover all the happenings in all of the divisions in both leagues, as well as highlighting women specifically in baseball. And that is on YouTube, as well as all places that you get your podcasts. And you'll find that in my link tree as well. So that's a couple times a month, bi-monthly, and then Peace, Love, and Baseball coming at you weekly.
2 shows. That's incredible. Yeah, everybody please go and check them out. They're great shows. And hey, if after you're done checking out those shows and you want to continue to support our show is listener supported on Patreon, patreon.com/talkingaboutbirds. We have a wonderful Discord server that is a great place to get away from the noise of all the different social medias that are out there. If you are sick of maybe all of the ranting and raving and the hatred that goes around, you want a place that would not convince Adam Wainwright to leave Twitter, consider joining our Patreon. The Discord is a great place to be. We have all of the different social medias as well. The easiest way to find those is at talkingaboutbirds.com. That is until we sell that domain to some sort of bird company, which is really how we hope to cash out of this whole thing. So, Kelsey, the trade deadline is coming up. What are you looking for from this trade deadline? We've seen there are some people are in the camp of tear it all down. Arenado, Goldie, all of them. If it's not Walker and Gorman, and then pick your flavor of maybe Newt Bar or everyone has their own favorite players. Like burn it all down. Where do you fall on the spectrum? And are you thinking at all about the winning that is happening right now? Is that coloring your perception of the upcoming trade deadline?
Well, it is first and foremost because, like you, I am an eternal optimist, and I want Cardinal baseball to be fun for as long as
Yeah.
possible. And I also am like coming in with my fire hose because I have serious attachment issues to all of these guys, and
Yeah, of
I
course.
I don't know. I'm
Not
probably
my
not a great
boys.
person. Yeah, I might not be a great person to talk about this because I don't particularly love the idea of trading any of our position players. who are
Yeah.
currently on the active roster, except for maybe two. And that would be like Paul DeYoung and a catcher.
Yeah.
But other than that, like I think there is actually a good variety of talent that has not been utilized in the best of ways, specifically this season. So like I see a very clear fit for all of the rest of them, including like Mason Wynn in there too,
Hmm.
potentially, this year. And I I don't know. I really liked listening to Ben's ideas last week, especially with, his knowledge around like the different pitchers to be excited about in different organizations, which I do not have the insight
Hmm.
on. So I don't know. I would have to be given like a very clear, like pretty on a platter, like this for this. What do you think? And even then, I probably would
Yeah.
feel really tormented about it.
It is difficult, right? Because the whole thing around fandom is like we support these guys. This is our team, and you especially like everybody values their players way more than some other player out there, right? Like Alec Burleson, a popular candidate to be traded. I've been a huge fan of calling him Chief Beef. I see him as a cornerstone of this team, but he hasn't really done what we've been hoping for this year. But I still see, like, you can see it, right? Look at those underlying numbers. You can see it, right? Like, he
Yeah.
just needs the opportunity. But I do get to the point to where, like I hear you on, you can see all of these parts and you can see how this all fits together. But that's what we thought this year, right? And it didn't happen. So
Yeah.
what are the odds that it would happen next year? And so I have been leaning more towards what we talked about with last week with like, with Ben and saying like we should probably try to trade like 4 or 5 guys from the main roster right now and free up some of this space and give someone like a Dylan Carlson just the starting job and just say,
Yeah.
there you go, buddy. You are the starter. Or maybe not Carlson. Maybe it's O'Neill, Newbar, and Walker, and assuming health, which is of course always the underlying, unknown. You just say, there you go. There's no longer this like lurking pressure that every single at bat is your job, which I know is part of sports, but it has to feel particularly difficult when there's like 4 guys behind you all the time, which is what is happening with the Cardinals.
Yeah, there's not enough
But
consistency to even be able to make sense of like what you really need to do or how much of it is in
yeah,
your control. So, yeah.
yeah. But when you talk about like the optimist side of me, it is a real struggle because like my the forward thinking version of me, future Nate, is like, we really gotta make these trades and we really should tear down for and focus on 2024. But future Nate doesn't exist yet. Now Nate exists, and now Nate likes to watch good Cardinal baseball. And even
Mhm.
though I know the right thing is for the Cardinals to actually lose as much as possible over the next couple months, if you believe that they don't really have a shot at the Central anymore, which I still do, despite the winning streak. The right call is for them to lose as much as possible, but
Right.
I just have such a hard time like actually committing to that opinion. And this little winning streak, I can't lie, it's got me back. Like, what
I
if?
know. I know.
We're only 10 back. We've been, teams have come back from worse with less. The Cardinals have come back from worse with less.
They
Like
have.
we've done that. We've been here. We just need another miracle. Hey, don't worry, we'll do it. We do it every year. But I don't know. It's like this whole season has been so chaotic and so inconsistent and so bad. What are the odds that the next 70 games are suddenly this like full reversal of everything, and we win out basically, and also the Brewers collapse, and also the Reds, who are
Mhm.
kind of collapsing, they also collapse. I just I'm still on board with this tear down, or it's not tear down, it's like retool for 2024. But
Yeah.
there's still a part of me that's like, no, bye, let's do this.
Yeah, I think it would be easier if it was clear which puzzle pieces weren't fitting and like
Yeah,
what even needed to be changed out. But that's the thing that I mean, besides the pitching, it's I don't know. There is
yeah,
still a lot that works, and
yeah.
I don't know.
The
That's why
pro
I say it has to be like this for me to say
Yeah,
go on any of it because I am very logical in terms of like if there was a clear solution or, something that just makes more sense, I can, be objective about that, but
yeah,
without that being like right in front of my face, I'm like, "No, let's just stay here and keep winning."
yeah. Just keep winning. The thing that brings me back to like they need to sell is that um if they don't go out and acquire ample amounts of possible pitchers, 2024 is going to be horrible.
Yes.
Like we'll have the same problems on the offense, the same log jams on the offense, and we won't have Jordan Montgomery, Jack Flaherty, Adam Wainwright. Not that that's really helped, but he's still been someone who is at least throwing for it. Like it's only going to be worse in 2024. And so, like, yeah, maybe you could sell out for a miracle 2023 run, but 2024 is going to be even worse. So I'm like, that's not that long from now that I can be like, all right, future Nate, like we should probably prioritize you over current Nate, even if you don't exist yet. But
That's
I
a
don't
good
know. We'll
point.
see. The nice thing is that there's only 12 days until this is all
I know,
settled.
I'm
So
just ready for it to be over, but you
yeah,
are so right, like, the pitching is such a systemic problem that as much as I would like to think that just, like, hang tight and wait till the off season, that will not set us
yeah.
up for 2024 at least, so
Because the only solution at this point, if they don't do something now with these pieces that are likely to become free agents, is to spend a ton of money in the offseason on guys like Aaron Nola and a few other options at that level. And we just have no evidence that the Cardinals are willing to do that. So
right.
what are the odds that this offseason they'll suddenly decide to sign 2 or 3 major starting pitchers? And it's like, no, the correct move is to trade Jordan Montgomery, Jordan Hicks, Jack Flaherty, uh, probably someone like Tommy Edman or Brendan Donovan, or I know, but
The
it's
only one I love more than Tommy Edman is Brendan Donovan, and the only one I love more than Brendan Donovan is Tommy Edman, and I don't
yeah, I mean, Donovan is just looking like a cornerstone, but you got to trade talent to get talent, and if we truly think we're gonna get like all these trades you see online where it's like, so when Mozeliak traded for Arenado and Goldschmidt, that's not how it normally works, and he's not going to be able to pull it off that often. When I see these people like, oh yeah, just trade Tommy Edmonds straight up for Logan Gilbert, it's like, no, that's not going to happen. We're going to have to spend a lot to get something that's truly going to shape the Cardinals and make them better. So anyway, we'll see. Again, I appreciate your take on it. I think we are. I go back any hour I can be more on your side of like, no, let's just go for it, and then another, then I start thinking about it and thinking about 2024, and I come back around to tear it all down. So we'll see. I want to talk about the couple of series that are coming up. We should have hopefully some fun, but we'll see. We've got a 4-game series against the Cubs in Chicago. Are you going to try to go to any of these games?
I am. I'm going on Friday and on
Nice.
Sunday, so I will be
Hell
there.
yeah. All right. Uh, I mean, 4 games in Wrigley. Yeesh, like this could go in so many different directions. The Cubs are in a unique spot too. They're actually kind of in a similar spot to the Cardinals, although no one expected them to be good this year. But like, they're trying to decide: do they trade Cody Bellinger? Do they trade Marcus Stroman? Who, if they do decide to trade Stroman, he's uh, maybe the best option on the market for a contending team, which is disappointing because that would mean the Cubs will continue to improve. But they've been unfortunately pretty smart at these trade deadlines over the last few years, so I suspect that they'll make some good decisions. But should be a good series. I think that they're I suspect that they'll sell and they'll sell hard and they'll tank by the end of the year. And I think that probably the Cardinals end up at a better spot than them in the standings. But as it stands right now, should be a good series. Have you looked at the pitching lineup or matchups yet that you might get for Friday and Sunday?
Yeah, so Flaherty has been is written down at least
Yeah.
on Friday, and then Montgomery would align on Sunday. So I could see both of their last starts potentially as Cardinals, which
Yeah.
would be great and also emotional and sad. And we'll see if they even put J Money back out there again on Sunday. But that's kind of what I'm hoping for at this point because
Yeah.
I would like the opportunity just to see them in a Cardinals uniform, especially if it is for the last time.
Yeah. Do you go to many non-Cardinal games in Chicago?
I don't know. I've only been to a handful, but most of the time it's especially at Wrigley, like it's been stupid expensive the last
Yeah.
really since 2016. So I don't go to as many as I'd like to. I
Yeah.
also don't I used to live like literally steps away from there and I don't anymore.
Okay.
So it's not as easy for me to get down there. But yeah, mostly I spend my time there when the Cardinals are in town.
Yeah. Good answer. I don't want to spend any money on the Cubs. Uh, so it should be. It's always a fun series, though. Kind of a bandbox, right? You never know. It could be. You really. It kind of doesn't matter what the current situation is for either team. These games are usually good and can go in a million different directions. So
Yeah, it's the perfect example of how vibes matter because when Cubs and
yeah,
Cardinals are in the house, the vibes are high.
yeah. And then after that, they have 3 games in Arizona against the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks, a bit of a surprise this year. I think they were a lot of people's dark horse pick to be good this year, but I don't think anyone actually still expected it to really happen. And they have their flaws, but Zach Gallen, you know, Cardinal fans have some history with this guy, and there's a lot of opinions on him right now when you look around online. But he's front runner for the Cy Young, and then they have Corbin Carroll, who, uh, just some shoulder issues, but he's likely the runaway rookie of the year, if not a top MVP candidate. So interesting team. They've got some power. Traveling to Arizona for this game, as you pointed out to me, it's hot as hell out there. We'll see how they can. Yeah, like
Like
record breakingly.
dangerously hot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Whew.
I know they can temperature control to some degree in that stadium, but we'll see. I'd like to think the Cardinals of all teams are prepared for it. It gets hot here too, but some of the temperatures that they've been dealing with out there are pretty ridiculous. So should be a good series. I mean, this will be a really interesting test of, is this Cardinals revival actually real or not? Because it's the Nationals and the Marlins, and I know the Marlins have been good this year, but again, they've also been super lucky. So going to Chicago for 4 games and then going to Arizona for 3 games, like, we might be talking again in a week around like, well, that was a fun little run back to burning
Right.
it all down,
Right.
and if the run continues, you're going to see more and more people start to call for, like, what is probably still not the right move, but a thing that I think, I understand. So we'll see. All right. I want to run through just a few things from around the league. I don't know how much of this you've heard about, but a few interesting things have happened over the last week. And then we're going to play a little game, and I'll let you get back to your normal life here. So something that we've been tracking a lot on the show is the Bally's situation and just general access to baseball games across the board. I think that uh, the rule changes have been generally good for baseball. We're obviously seeing some good data around it, but I think the biggest problem facing baseball is fan access to the sport,
Yep.
and the league's like horrible system for allowing people to watch the games and their ineptitude around promoting their own game. We spent quite a while last week talking about how bad they are at promoting the home run derby, which seems like the easiest thing in the world to promote and give access to. But anyway, so for the second time now, a team has failed to come to agreement with a provider, and the MLB has taken over the production and broadcast. So the Arizona Diamondbacks, who we were just talking about, failed to come to an agreement with Bally's, and now the MLB is in control fully of the production and release of their broadcast. This is the second team to have that happen, and while I have a hard time saying I trust the MLB to do anything, I actually do think this is a step in the right direction because you're getting the cable companies out of the middle. And I think you can at least say MLB really cares about promoting its sport, even though they do a bad job at it. What you can't say is that Bally's truly cares about baseball, right? So I think you're cutting out a middle, like a middle massive conglomerate that doesn't really care about the sport. They just care about the profit, and you're putting in charge people who at least should care about it. And they've said some right things around getting rid of blackouts, increasing access, and things like that. So it'll be a big test, but I'm hopeful that this is another domino falling in the direction of making baseball accessible to everyone, at least more easily. You should be able to just get MLB TV and get access to everything and everything at a price, you know.
It would
So I
be
don't know,
nice.
Kelsey.
It is good that it's kind of like happening the way that it is, I guess, maybe like a little bit at a time. I know the Padres were the first that it happened with, and I was watching like their Mets series, and I guess I didn't think about it then that I noticed like anything that was glaringly different, but it's a comfort to know that like it is this seemingly easy of a transition as a consumer, that like don't worry, it will be there, and hopefully that it's happening a little bit at a time will
Yeah.
ultimately make it a successful transition.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. You know, it could end up being the bad path to go down, but I just can't imagine the correct solution is to put it in charge, put more cable companies in charge of this stuff. So we'll see. But yeah, and I think this is the only way it could go. There's so many contracts tied up in all this stuff. I mean, the Cardinals are in their multi-billion-dollar contracts and whatnot. Like, there's never going to be this just like overnight sweep where everything suddenly becomes better. It kind of has to go this way. A couple other things. So Andrew Painter, a player that we've talked about unrealistically around the Cardinals potentially acquiring from the Phillies. He's one of the best, if not the best, pitching prospects in baseball. He has been recommended to have Tommy John surgery. So we'll go ahead and take that guy off the board as far as potential trade targets for the Cardinals. And as just a fan of baseball, you know, it's disappointing when you see such like a young potential star have to go into such a dramatic surgery, though. Obviously, Tommy John isn't what it used to be. We expect he'll be back, but still, for the short term Cardinal, you know, aspirations, and then just the long term baseball impact, it's always disappointing to see that happen.
I feel like anytime that there is some kind of news that comes out about pitching, like someone who's really exciting in the pitching, that like it just I hate it because I feel
Yeah.
like Bill DeWitt and John Mozeliak are just looking at each other like, see, no, we're still on the right track here.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. What did he say earlier? Like, well, signing a bunch of pitching wouldn't have helped anyway, right? Yeah, it's because,
Exactly. Yes.
yeah,
Like everything that happened with Jacob deGrom and Carlos Rodon, and then even like Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, I'm like, they're just sitting around looking at each other like, I mean, we've got this all figured out.
yeah,
And no wonder they didn't wave the white flag until now. But
yeah,
yeah, that's unfortunately what
yeah,
it made me think of right off the bat. But yeah, as a baseball fan, you hate to see it and you hope for the best.
yep. Well, speaking of pitching, the Pirates have signed the first overall draft pick, Paul Skeens or Skeins. Uh, Now automatic, like almost immediately, one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. He signed a record-breaking bonus at $9.2 million. I mean, basically every year the next guy gets the next biggest bonus. He broke Spencer Torkelson's record from 2021, so it's not like it was a long-standing record or anything, but still, this guy's going to be incredible. And unfortunately, as a Cardinal fan, we have to watch him be a Pirate for quite a while.
Yeah, we can't trade for him.
Um, I know, right? I mean, the Pirates typically make really bad trades, but they don't do it with us. They just send them down to everyone else.
Right.
And then finally, we've been talking about the rule changes. I think this was pretty emblematic of the new state of baseball on July 18th. Yesterday, 4 separate games had both teams scoring 10 plus runs. This was the first time since 1894.
That's
So, yeah, the league was trying to create more offense. I mean, I
I
know
think
it's
part
only
of that
one
is
day,
part of
but
that is the time of year too, I'm sure, but yeah, we were watching the, 5-2 Cardinals and Marlins game last night and seeing the scores pop up across the bottom of the TV, and we're like, "Whoa, everybody has more than 10 runs right
yeah,
now. Wait, was that the same
yeah,
score? No, that's a different score." So, yeah, it was crazy.
yeah, crazy night. And I mean, I think there's a possibility as the season goes on and pitchers get worn down even more. Like it might
Yep.
be, and as teams sell off, as parity reduces, as the top ends grab
Mhm.
all the best rentals and all the bad teams are just throwing out whoever. I mean, imagine what is the Cardinal rotation going to look like when and if they do trade Jordan Montgomery and Jack Flaherty. It's Dakota Hudson is like our number 3.
Yeah,
So we're
I'm
gonna
not
we're gonna see. Yeah, we're gonna see some more 10-run games. All right, so that's it for the league news section. Kelsey, we're gonna end this episode. Thank you again for your time with another stupid game. Uh, the the draft was last week. So prospects and minor league teams are in the news. And as we get deeper into the season and we get to September, the minor league season becomes more and more of a thing as teams start looking to dip into their teams to reinforce or maybe highlight some of their upcoming prospects. So you can't go very far right now without hearing something about the minor leagues. And one of the best things about the minor leagues, one of everybody's favorite things about the minor leagues, is the team names, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of fantastic team names. So, Kelsey, I've got a list of team names. Some of them are real and some of them are fake. And it is going to be up to you to determine whether it is real or whether it is fake in another
Ooh.
edition of AAA or Ah Ah Ah. So,
I will answer that
so
way too.
yes, yeah, those are the two answers. Even though, to be clear, this could be any non MLB team. So we're talking minor leagues, independent leagues. It can be basically all over the place. Okay. So I'm going to say a name and then you tell me, is it AAA or is it ah, ah, ah? All right. So starting off, the Charleston Crawdads.
I think that's AAA.
Nope, that is a fake one. The Charleston
Oh.
Crawdads.
I mean, that's a pretty good one compared to some of them that I've heard, so
Yeah,
someone should
thank you.
adapt that.
Yeah, I'm trying to moonlight as a team naming, and this is like team naming expert, and this is just my audition. All right, the Wichita Wingnuts.
I think that might be AAA as well.
That one you got. The Wichita
Alright.
Wingnuts are indeed a real
Wichita
team.
Wingnuts.
Wichita Wingnuts.
What is a
Yeah,
wingnut? Like,
that is a wingnut is like a nut that you put on like on a bolt to
yeah,
secure
but
it to
that's,
something,
like, what their mascot is?
and it's got the little like wings coming off of it.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah,
actually what their mascot is? Like, it's not even, like, a fun take
no,
on something? Okay.
yeah, I don't know. I assume maybe there's like a wing nut factory nearby or something like that. But you know what? There's also, this isn't on my list. This is from a previous version that we played. Uh, there's a Lansing Lugnuts team out there too. So I don't know. People just, looking for various hardware. Maybe they just open up their drawer and that's what's rolling around. Like, sure, that's a good enough team name. All right. You've gotten one. Next, we have the Traverse City Beach Bums. No, that is a real team. The Traverse City Beach Bums.
It shouldn't be. Come on, the Crawdads should definitely be over the Beach
Yeah.
Bums. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
the Beach Bums. It's a real team. Traverse City Beach Bums. All right, next up. The Santa Fe Little Helpers.
I want to say no, but like, did you make this up? So I'm going to say AAA.
I know I made that one up. The
Oh,
Santa Fe.
where did you even get that from?
Well, I thought it'd be funny because it's Santa,
Oh,
and
yeah. Santa.
Santa's
Oh, I
San,
should have
San,
known you made it up.
Santa's Little Helpers, Santa Fe Little Helpers.
There you go.
I had some free time today. All right.
Your audition is going well.
Yeah. Next one. The Lincoln County Logs.
I'm going to say
All right, you got me on that one.
Ooh,
That is
too
not
easy.
real.
Too obvious.
No. You might say Santa Fe Little Helpers was too obvious too. So.
I just wasn't thinking about it from the right angle in time.
All right. I've got a few more. The Normal Corn Belters.
Oh, so I am actually from Peoria, and I went to college in Bloomington Normal, so I know this one is AAA.
Very good. I've got one half of my family is from Peoria. I've spent a lot of time in East Peoria. So
I'm from Washington, which is right next to East Peoria.
My grandparents lived in Washington. That was where their retirement home was.
It's a beautiful
all right.
place to grow up or grow old.
Wow. That like huge tornado that came through a few
Mm-hmm.
was like
that was like
7 or 8 years ago.
now, but yeah.
It like went through their neighborhood and jumped and like crushed a bunch of houses and like jumped over a bunch of houses. It was crazy. We drove through it and it was like just totally random on whose houses got destroyed. And there's
that was the exact same as my family. It was nuts. I was living in New York at the time, and they like my family's phones, like they couldn't get in touch with each other, but somehow like they could get in touch with me. So I was able to like actually tell the rest of them that they were like okay, because they weren't all at home when it happened. But yeah, that was wild.
That is a dramatic situation.
Will exist someday.
Yeah, right. All right. 3 more for you. The Percyville Presidents. Yeah, all right. You got me on that one. All right. And next is the Batavia Muck Dogs.
I'm going to go AAA with that one.
You're on a roll. The Muck Dogs are indeed real.
Come back.
And finally, this is the last one. Hartford Horses.
I feel like I would have heard of them, so I'm going to say
All right, what a run! You have your 17-game win streak.
I'm better in the second half.
That's right. So you just got the last 5 in a row correct. So you ended up getting 6 out of 9. So very good.
Cardinals won the last 5 in a row. I think this is a sign.
There you go. I'm putting money on the Cardinals. They're winning it all this year. I'm inspired.
Why not?
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode. Kelsey, great work. Good job. You saw through most of my ruses. Thanks for joining me this week.
I think you still have a future in AAA team naming. So
thank you. I don't know how many job openings there are, but there's got to be someone out there. So, as we said before, check out Kelsey's podcast. They're fantastic. Follow on Twitter and everything. Kelsey, thank you so much for joining me this week and filling in for Ben. We'll have to have you back again sometime. Maybe with Ben again, maybe without. This might have been, an improvement overall. But thank you again for your time.
You're out there.
Yeah, wherever he may be right now, somewhere deep in the woods of Canada. So we'll be back next week, assuming Ben returns with another episode. Interesting times for the Cardinal fans. May we live in interesting times, right? And we're getting that right now. So until next week, go Cardinals. All right.